Have you ever wondered why you keep repeating the same painful patterns, even when you know they're destroying you? Why some people trigger a storm inside you while others walk away untouched? Or why, after all the books you've read and all the healing you've attempted, there's still something hollow beneath your skin? This is not by accident. The truth is simple and terrifying. There are parts of you you've buried alive, and they are still breathing. They scream in your relationships, in your silence, in the way you self-sabotage the moment happiness arrives. This is your shadow, and it's not going away. You can pretend to be healed. You can say the right things, post the right quotes, meditate for hours, but none of that will save you from what you refuse to face. Carl Jung warned that until we make the unconscious conscious, it will rule our lives and we will call it fate. So today we stop pretending. These 10 prompts are not made to comfort you. They're designed to provoke the part of you that's been hiding for too long. If you're brave enough to continue, then take a deep breath. We begin. Now, 1. Who did I have to become in order to be loved as a child? And how is that identity still shaping my life today? Think carefully. Somewhere along the line, you decided who you needed to be to feel safe. Maybe you learned to be quiet, helpful, entertaining, invisible, obedient, strong. Maybe you learned to smile when you were in pain, to fix everything before it broke, to be agreeable even when you want to scream. That was never your true self. It was a performance crafted out of survival. The real question is, are you still performing? Are you still trying to earn love by being someone you're not? Jung believed individuation, the path to becoming whole, requires the death of the false self. This prompt is your funeral for who you never were. It's time to name the mask, mourn it, and ask, if I wasn't trying to be loved, who would I be? 2. What do I criticize most in others? And what does that say about the parts of myself I've disowned? This one stings. Your judgments are not random. Every person you can't stand is a mirror. What you hate in others reveals what you can't accept in yourself. When you call someone arrogant, is it really because you've suppressed your own desire to be seen? When you say someone's too emotional, could it be that your own emotions are locked behind walls of shame? Projection is the most subtle form of self-rejection. The traits we exile from ourselves are the ones we attack when we see them in others. Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. So next time someone triggers you, don't react, reflect, ask, what part of me am I looking at right now? And why does it hurt so much to see it? 3. When did I first learn that being myself was dangerous? And how have I lived behind armor ever since? Think back to the moment you felt unsafe being real. Maybe you were laughed at, punished, or ignored. Maybe your honesty was called disrespect. Your joy, too much. Your sadness, unwelcome. That moment taught you to build armor, and that armor became your personality. But armor is heavy, and it's exhausting. The world might have convinced you that your truth was dangerous, but now you must ask, is it still true? Who would you become if you took the armor off? Not all at once, but piece by piece. What kind of life are you missing by being who you think you have to be? This prompt isn't about ripping yourself open. It's about acknowledging that who you are beneath the mask is not a threat, it's a gift. For what emotions do I suppress most? And what would happen if I allowed myself to fully feel them? This question opens the floodgates. Most of us were taught to avoid certain emotions. Anger is dangerous. Sadness is weakness. Fear is failure. But suppressed emotions don't die. They mutate. They become passive aggression, numbness, anxiety, addiction, illness. Shadow work requires us to feel what we've locked away, to sit with the discomfort instead of fleeing from it. If you constantly suppress anger, ask, where's my rage living now? If you avoid grief, ask, what part of me is still in mourning? Emotion is not the enemy. Repression is. And until you let your emotions move through you, They will continue to control you from the dark. Feel it, name it, let it pass. This is only the beginning. The first 4 prompts are like cracks in a wall you spent a lifetime maintaining. But through those cracks, your soul begins to breathe. You're not here to be perfect, you're here to be whole. And wholeness starts where your fear begins. Shadow work is not easy, but it is honest. And honesty is the sharpest tool you have in carving out a life that belongs to you. 5. What part of myself have I tried to fix the most? And why did I decide it was broken in the first place? This question hits at the heart of your inner programming. Somewhere someone, maybe a parent, a teacher, a partner, society, taught you that a certain part of who you were is not okay. Maybe you were too sensitive, too intense, too stubborn, too dreamy, too wild. Whatever it was, it got labeled as a flaw. And from that moment on, you've been trying to fix it. You've read books, taken courses, whispered affirmations, and still, deep inside, you carry the belief that this part of you is fundamentally wrong. But here's the real question. What if it never was? What if the part of you you're trying to change is actually your greatest power, simply misunderstood? Jung believed that the rejected aspects of the self contain the most creative, energetic, and essential material for your growth. When you disown a part of yourself, you also reject the gift it carries. So ask yourself honestly, what am I constantly trying to correct in myself? Why do I believe it needs to be corrected? And who benefits from me believing I'm broken? Start tracing the origin of that belief. Who first gave you the impression that this part of you is a problem? What was their agenda? Were they trying to control you, tame you, silence you, or make you easier to manage? You need to understand this. Not everything people called a flaw was ever a flaw. Sometimes it was just your freedom showing, and freedom terrifies the people who've given up on their own. If you've spent your life trying to be less emotional, maybe it's time to feel again. If you've tried to be more agreeable, maybe it's time to reclaim your no. The parts you've been told to suppress are not weeds. They're wildflowers growing in a world that only knows how to trim. This prompt dares you to stop fixing what isn't broken and to start loving what you thought you had to kill. 6. Where do I constantly feel the need to prove myself? And what fear is driving that need? Pause here. Feel the tension in your body when you think about this, the hunger to be good enough, to be seen, to be accepted, to be applauded. You work hard, you overthink, you overperform, and still there's a voice in your head whispering, not yet, not enough. Where did it come from? Who made you believe that your worth is conditional, that you have to earn your right to exist? This prompt is not about shaming your ambition. It's about questioning the fear that fuels it. Jung often spoke of the shadow manifesting through our compulsions, when we do things not out of joy, but out of unconscious terror. The need to prove yourself isn't driven by passion. It's driven by a fear of being invisible. And that fear was planted long ago. Maybe you had to fight for attention in your home. Maybe love was earned through grades, obedience, or silence. Maybe every time you slowed down, you were labeled lazy. Maybe your value was always tied to what you did, not who you were, and now you can't stop. You're exhausted, but you don't know how to rest. You crave validation like oxygen because somewhere deep down, you still believe that if you stop achieving, they'll stop loving, or worse, they'll finally see the truth that you were never enough to begin with. But that's a lie, a brutal, inherited lie. This prompt forces you to confront the addiction to external approval, to name the places where you hustle for worth: social media, work, relationships. Even your spiritual journey can become another performance. But healing doesn't come from being admired. It comes from being authentic. And authenticity means you stop asking, do they like me? And start asking, do I even like myself when I'm around them? The next time you catch yourself trying to prove your value, pause, ask, what am I afraid will happen if I just let myself be? Behind that fear is a wounded child, still trying to earn love, but you are not that child anymore. You have the power now to rewrite the story. You have the right to be enough, Without the performance, without the applause, without the perfect result, this prompt doesn't ask you to stop trying. It asks you to start choosing, to choose actions based on desire, not desperation, to build a life that's rooted in truth, not anxiety. Because the need to prove is the shadow's way of saying, I still don't believe I'm worthy. But what if you stopped chasing proof? What would remain? Who would you be if your worth was no longer up for debate? That's the shift, and it's not comfortable, but it's the most honest work you'll ever do. 7. What part of me still believes I must suffer in order to grow? And where did I learn that pain equals progress? This belief hides in plain sight. It shows up when you sabotage peace, when you push love away, when you overcomplicate healing or refuse ease, as if ease makes you weak. Many of us were raised on the idea that anything worthwhile must come through struggle. We were told that pain builds character, that only through suffering can we earn our transformation. So we started chasing pain like it was sacred, romanticizing burnout, martyrdom, and toxic relationships we called it growth, but was it? Or was it just familiar? This prompt asks you to trace your internal compass. Does it always point toward hardship? Do you trust things that feel good? Or do you suspect them? When a healthy opportunity arrives, do you shrink? When love is soft and steady, do you find it boring? These are signs that your nervous system equates intensity with value. Somewhere, someone taught you that joy must be earned through blood. Maybe it was a parent who only gave affection when you suffered. Maybe it was religion, culture, or even a teacher who drilled into you that you're only worthy when you endure. But that's not truth. That's trauma wearing tradition's mask. Carl Jung knew that the unconscious often holds onto old contracts, silent agreements we made in childhood to stay safe. One of the most damaging contracts says, if I hurt, they'll see me. If I struggle, I'll matter. It's time to tear that one up. This prompt is about replacing pain worship with self-respect. Growth doesn't always have to be brutal. Sometimes the deepest evolution comes through stillness, through pleasure, through kindness. But you can't access that until you stop glorifying wounds. Ask yourself honestly, where am I still choosing pain over peace, simply because I believe I must? 8. What do I fear people would see if I stopped hiding? And what is the cost of staying invisible? Take a breath. This is one of the hardest questions you'll ever face. Not because it's complicated, but because it's too real. So many people go their whole lives performing invisibility, hiding their truth, their voice, their art, their anger, their love. Because somewhere along the way, the world told them they were too much, too emotional, too intense, too loud, too soft, too different. And they believed it, so they disappeared, not physically, but spiritually, energetically, creatively, they shrank. Maybe that's you. Maybe you've been playing small for so long you forgot how to take up space. Maybe you stay quiet in rooms where your soul wants to roar. Maybe you say, I'm fine when you're breaking. Maybe you keep your ideas in notebooks, your desires in daydreams, your grief behind forced smiles. This prompt asks you, what are you so afraid they'll see? That you're hurting? That you're brilliant? That you care? That you have needs, boundaries, and edges? Your shadow holds the answers because the things you hide are the very things you believe are unlovable. Jung taught that what we repress doesn't die. It waits, and it waits with resentment. The more you hide your real self, the more your shadow grows bitter, angry, desperate to be seen. That's when it starts leaking out in passive aggression, in anxiety, in addiction, in depression. Not because you're broken, but because your truth is suffocating under the weight of your performance. You were never meant to be invisible. You were born to radiate, to challenge, to shake the room just by standing in it. But that power only awakens when you stop hiding. This prompt is not asking you to expose everything at once. It's asking you to stop abandoning yourself. What would happen if, just once, you told the truth, even if your voice trembled? If you walked into the room without shrinking your presence? If you stopped laughing at jokes that hurt you, stopped agreeing with people who drain you, stopped apologizing for simply existing, the cost of invisibility is your life, and the longer you stay hidden, the harder it is to remember who you are. But you can begin again. You can start small. You can take up 1 inch more space today than you did yesterday. And in that space, your real self can finally breathe. 9. What patterns keep repeating in my relationships? And what deeper wound are they pointing to within me? You don't attract what you want. You attract what you are at your core, especially what is unresolved. That's the brutal truth about relationships. They are mirrors, not mistakes. You might think you're just unlucky in love, or that you keep ending up with the wrong kind of people. But what if they're exactly the kind of people your shadow needs in order to wake you up? What if your heartbreaks weren't accidents, but invitations? Look closely. Do you keep choosing people who are emotionally unavailable? People who make you prove your worth? People who take more than they give? That isn't random. Your nervous system is reenacting the emotional dynamics it learned in childhood. If love once meant chasing, pleasing, or suffering, your body will recreate that pattern until it feels familiar enough to call it home. It's not about blame, it's about recognition. This prompt isn't just about naming toxic dynamics, it's about tracking them back to their root. Ask yourself, who did I have to become in order to feel loved by my parents or caregivers? Did I have to earn it? Hide parts of myself? Be perfect? Be quiet? Now ask, is that same role playing out in my romantic life, my friendships, even my work? That's not coincidence. That's a wound still bleeding beneath your awareness. Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you'll call it fate. Every repeated dynamic is a message, one that gets louder until you finally listen. So listen now. Were you still abandoning yourself to avoid being abandoned by someone else? Were you still betraying your needs for the illusion of safety? Where do you accept crumbs and call it love? These patterns are not here to punish you. They're here to guide you back to the parts of you that believe they're only lovable when they suffer. Until you heal that belief, you will keep choosing pain, but when you recognize the pattern, name the wound, and reclaim your truth, you break the cycle. You begin to choose from wholeness, not hunger, from alignment, not addiction, and that's when everything starts to change. 10. What truth have I been most afraid to admit to myself? And what would change if I finally said it out loud? This is the most dangerous question of them all, because once you admit the truth, you can't go back. Once you name the lie you've been living, you can no longer pretend it's real, and that's terrifying. It means the job you hate, the relationship that's rotting, the identity you've outgrown, all of it becomes impossible to numb. That's the cost of truth, clarity, and clarity demands action. So ask yourself, with brutal honesty, what truth have you buried under routine, distraction, and busyness? What do you know in your bones but refuse to speak? Maybe it's that you're not happy, that you don't love them anymore, that you've outgrown your life, that your dreams still haunt you, that you're pretending, that you're scared, that you're angry, that you're done, that you want more. The words will feel dangerous. They will burn in your throat, but they are the key to your freedom. You don't need to tell anyone else yet. You don't need to post it, explain it, justify it. You just need to admit it to yourself, to write it, to speak it, to stop denying what your body has already known for years. Because as long as you refuse to face it, your life will stay frozen, your shadow will grow restless, and that quiet sense of suffocation will never leave. Jung believed that the greatest transformations begin not with action, but with awareness. This prompt is the beginning of that. Awareness. It's the moment you stop lying to yourself. So write it down, whisper it, scream it if you have to. Let the words exist outside of you. You'll be afraid, that's normal, but you'll also feel something you haven't felt in years. Alignment. That sensation of your inner world finally matching your outer world. That's what truth does. It pierces the illusion and makes space for real life to begin. And yes, it will cost you. Truth always costs something: comfort, familiarity, approval. But it will give you back something far more valuable: yourself. Shadow work doesn't end the moment you answer a few hard questions. It begins there because the point of these prompts was never to give you clarity alone. It was to disrupt you, to pull you out of the stories you've rehearsed your entire life and ask, what if none of it was real? What if your personality is just your pain in disguise? What if your entire identity was built around avoiding rejection, abandonment, failure, or shame? These 10 questions didn't come here to soothe you. They came to show you how much of your life has been shaped by a fear you never dared to name. You've now touched the surface of the mask. The part of you that tries to be lovable, smart, strong, calm, successful, or selfless. But underneath that, there's a layer of rage you've hidden, softness you've buried, dreams you've discarded, and desires you muted. Why? Because the world told you they were too much. Because you told yourself they were dangerous, and yet they've been waiting patiently, not to destroy your life, but to return it to you. Shadow work is not about finding darkness and removing it. It's about reclaiming your fullness, including the light that scared others into dimming you. Each prompt you just faced was a doorway. The version of you who walked into this process is not the same one who's walking out. Even if the world doesn't see it yet, your unconscious does. It felt you turn toward it instead of away. It felt you stop running. And now, there's a new question. What will you do with what you now know? You've seen how your childhood shaped your behavior. You've witnessed how judgment masks projection. You've named the performance you created for survival. You've looked at your emotional avoidance, your compulsive self-fixing, your addiction to proving your worth. You've traced the patterns in your relationships and found the original wound. You stood face to face with the truth you feared to admit, and you spoke it. That's not small work. That's initiation, and every initiation demands something in return: action, because awareness without embodiment is just insight, but insight with courage, that's transformation. Now comes the deeper phase: living differently, saying no when you used to shrink, expressing anger without guilt, allowing pleasure without shame, feeling sadness without calling it weakness, holding power without apologizing for it. This is how your shadow becomes your ally, not by being exiled, but by being seen, named, honored, and integrated. Shadow work is a sacred rebellion. It's the refusal to keep living the way others programmed you. It's breaking the cycle that your parents couldn't. It's daring to ask yourself not what the world wants from you, but what your soul needs to feel alive. And sometimes what it needs will cost you comfort, belonging, or even a version of your identity, but you've already paid a much higher price by ignoring it. Disconnection from your own truth. Don't be surprised if grief shows up. Realizing how much of your life was built around avoidance or fear can be heartbreaking. Grieve the years you lost. Grieve the masks you wore. But don't stay there, because behind that grief is the ground where your real self can finally grow. The one who doesn't perform. The one who doesn't hustle for love. The one who doesn't settle for half-truths just to feel safe. Remember this. The goal isn't perfection, it's wholeness. You're not here to become some ideal version of yourself. You're here to become the version of you that can hold contradiction, strength and softness, rage and compassion, power and vulnerability. To be whole is to stop fragmenting, to stop cutting off the parts of you that made others uncomfortable, to stop shrinking into categories, labels, or roles. The shadow will keep showing up every time you deny your depth, every time you reduce yourself to what's digestible for others, every time you choose safety over authenticity. But now you know better. You've met the shadow, and the shadow, in return, has given you something rare: vision to see through your patterns, to call out your ego, to stop blaming others for what you refuse to heal. That vision won't always feel like a gift. Sometimes it will isolate you. Sometimes it will make you feel like the only one awake in a room full of sleepers, but that's the path of awakening, and it's worth it. This is your turning point. You don't have to go back to sleep. You don't have to keep living a life that looks good but feels empty. You don't have to keep repeating the same old emotional choreography, hoping for a new ending. You can choose to create something new. From the inside out, you can walk away from roles that no longer fit, relationships that no longer honor you, and beliefs that no longer reflect who you are becoming. Not everyone will understand. Not everyone will celebrate your shift, but you're not doing this for applause. You're doing this for alignment, for inner peace, for integrity, and in time, your outer world will rise to meet your inner one. It always does. So pause here, not to end, but to listen. What is your shadow asking from you now? What truth is still waiting to be spoken? What choice is begging to be made? Don't rush past this. Let echo. Because this isn't just shadow work, it's soul work, and your soul has been waiting for you to come home. There comes a moment, quiet, unremarkable on the surface, where something inside you shifts. It's not dramatic, no lightning, no music swelling, just a breath, a pause, a subtle, almost imperceptible sense that you're no longer willing to lie to yourself. That moment is sacred because it marks the beginning of real change, the kind that doesn't ask for attention, but for truth. If you've come this far, it means you've already crossed a threshold most people avoid their entire lives. You've stopped chasing comfort. You've started seeking clarity. And now, the work is no longer about the prompts. It's about what you do with what they've revealed. Because when you stop hiding from your shadow, you start to see that it was never your enemy. It was your guardian, your protector, the keeper of every part of you that was once shamed, silenced, punished, or abandoned. It held your fire when the world demanded obedience. It held your tears when no one wanted to see you cry. It held your voice when speaking would have made you a target. And yes, it held your pain, but not to harm you, to preserve the parts of you that the world wasn't ready to meet. Now the question becomes, are you ready to meet them? The truth is, most people live as fragments, a personality for work, another for family, a different one in love. They don't live. They perform, not because they're fake, but because they've never been taught how to hold the totality of who they are. You've just done what few are willing to do. You sat in the fire. You asked the hard questions. You chose discomfort over denial. That alone changes everything. Because the person who is willing to see themselves fully cannot be controlled. Not by others, not by shame, not by fear. But the shadow isn't something you conquer once and forget. It's not a one-time awakening. It's a lifelong relationship. It will rise again when you're faced with new vulnerability, new success, new intimacy. Every new chapter brings old wounds to the surface, asking to be seen again with wiser eyes. And that's okay. You don't need to be finished. You need to be honest again and again. You'll know you're integrating when you stop rejecting your emotional truth, when you feel anger and don't run from it, when sadness visits and you sit with it instead of numbing, when joy comes and you don't shrink it, when you begin to live from the inside out, not from expectation, not from survival, but from something raw and real and rooted. The more you honor what's true within you, the more life begins to realign around that truth. You may lose people. That's part of it. Not everyone can walk beside the version of you that no longer performs. Some only love the mask. And as painful as that is, it's also liberating, because when your truth begins to burn brighter than your fear of being alone, you start to attract what matches your frequency. Not your wounds. You stop asking, will they like me? And start asking, do I feel safe to be myself here? That is the pivot from trauma to truth. You will also begin to notice something else. Space where anxiety used to live, space where guilt used to eat away at you, space where you used to react, perform, or self-abandon. In that space, your soul begins to stretch, not upward, but inward. It's not about becoming someone new. It's about finally coming home to who you were before the world told you who to be. You may begin to remember dreams that seemed too impractical. You may find yourself drawn to different kinds of people. You may start saying no more often, laughing louder, crying more freely, speaking without apology. These are not side effects. These are signs of return. The more integrated you become, the less effort it takes to be authentic. That's the real freedom. Not perfection, not achievement, but congruence. There is no final step in shadow work, no finish line. The path spirals inward, not forward. Some days you'll feel powerful, other days lost. That's not failure, that's the rhythm of transformation. Be patient with the part of you that still struggles. Don't shame it. That's how the shadow grows deeper. When we pretend we're past what still hurts, integration is not bypassing the pain. It's walking beside it without collapsing. It's saying, yes, this is part of me, and I choose to love myself. Anyway, if there's one thing to carry from this entire journey, let it be this. You are not your shadow, but your shadow is part of you. And the parts you've hated, feared, or denied are often the ones holding your genius, your vision, your voice. You don't need to exile them. You need to welcome them, to listen, to ask what they've been trying to protect. You'd be amazed how much beauty lies inside the parts you tried to erase. The world needs people who've done this kind of work, who can sit with chaos and not flinch, who can hold pain without projection, who can meet others with compassion because they've met themselves with truth. That is what shadow work ultimately gives you. Not superiority, not enlightenment, but depth that allows you to be fully human, fully alive, and fully aligned. So, take this with you. The questions are never really finished. The answers will evolve. The work will deepen, but you now carry the tools. And more than that, you carry the courage. You face the mirror, you walk through the fire. And on the other side, you didn't become someone else. You remembered who you've always been. And that is everything.